Let's get started. And we will start by kicking things off by just talking about the growing need for STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So why do you think it's important for students of all ages to be exposed to STEM education? John, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I think everyone here in the panel will agree that STEM has really become a very important part of education in the past 5 or 10 years. As we continue to improve our curriculums across the school district, I think there's a growing need to implement more STEM activities. So I feel that as we continue to do this, we're going to not only prepare our students for future careers in the work field, but also as they prepare to enter into college. I feel that everything they're going to get is really going to be beneficial.
Great. Melissa, you have other thoughts?
Sure. I also believe in the rural schools, we face a lot of financial constraints, and they may not get exposed to some of the technology that the bigger schools have. So if we can get these grants, fund a lot of this technology, they can compete with students from larger schools and hopefully get into the colleges and have the careers that they would really like to have.
That's great. I like that. What do you think the biggest challenges or opportunities are for rural schools looking to get kids interested in STEM? Beth, let's start with you.
I would say one of the many challenges that teachers face is just providing those tangible, hands-on experiences to students. Our district is very lucky in that we have a number of opportunities. Our schools have STEM nights and learning fairs where we invite students, families in for these types of events. We also have a great community partnership where our teachers can actually do a loan process where they will loan kits to our teachers with all the materials already in them, and they bring those into the classroom on a loan type basis and can be used across the district.
That's great. Lots of great suggestions and opportunities for STEM in the classrooms and involving the parents too, which is great. Yes. Jason, anything else?
The biggest challenge, I think, as Melissa stated earlier, is just getting technology in the hands of our kids. Mm-hmm. You know, the budget is tight, but when we get technology in the hands of our students, they do great things. And then the opportunity that comes with that is the natural engagement, and students begin to problem solve and really make that connection between classroom learning and authentic actual learning that takes place in real life, which really, as a result, prepares them for college readiness, career readiness, and that is what the money from the Monsanto Fund did for us.
That's great. Bridging that gap is really fantastic. Other challenges that anybody sees in getting STEM into schools?
I think what everyone's kind of said too is funding, obviously, for those STEM projects is the biggest thing. I mean, all these items are very costly items. So getting the students to engage in STEM activities is the easy part. The hard part is really getting the materials for those students to get engaged with.
Right.
And I think it's a shift from here's the set curriculum to what can you do with this material? How can you problem solve? What new learning can you expand on that we didn't think was possible before?
And the next generation science standards, they really want the students to do that. You're learning the material, but then they want you to go a step further where they're designing some of their own experiments. So, having the technology there will definitely make it a whole lot easier.
Right, it's great.
And it's not isolated anymore. It's not science, technology, engineering, or math. This integrates it all together. So when you have more of an abstract science concept, you can turn it into more of a concrete math problem.
Right. Exactly. I think that's a great point. I mean, we hear from schools a lot of the time they say that they are teaching STEM, and really they have science class. And they might have computer science class, and they have some engineering, and they might have some math. It's that integration and those problem-solving skills that are so incredibly important, and hands-on learning provides those opportunities. So that's great. As you've engaged your students in STEM education, what have you found that is working or not working?
Where we've really seen success is when we can introduce hands-on learning to just what we said, so it's not so abstract. That students can become excited about what they're doing. It isn't a worksheet and tell us what you've learned. It's an inquiry-based approach, and we can problem solve as we're going through. And so with our project, we were able to bring that technology directly to our school.
Great. So will you tell us a little bit about the weather bug?
Sure. We love what we were able to do. We were fortunate enough to win a $25,000 grant. And with that, we bought a WeatherBug weather station that's on top of our school. We have a live camera that shoots the image of our school. So we have current weather in Dongola, but it also feeds to our local news stations. So we also hear about it on the evening news when we're home with our families.
So super exciting for the kids.
It's very
This
exciting.
is at my school.
Well, and
we're in the news every day.
Yes, and
it's great.
Exactly what Melissa said. We're a very small rural school, so this makes our students feel more competitive with our larger neighbors.
Right. That's great. Beth, any other thoughts?
Well, I think Paige I really just echo kind of what she said. It's that hands-on opportunities for students that really gets them truly engaged in what they're doing, what they're learning, provides that real life experiences. Again, so much better than just reading about it and completing a worksheet.
Right.
Now I have my hands on it, I'm involved, just those opportunities and providing those to our students.
Let's talk more specifically about the program itself, the America's Farmers Grow Rural Education Program. How has this program helped you and your school district enhance STEM learning? John, let's pick on you first again.
Okay. The America's Farmers Rural Education Program has really helped our district in purchasing interactive tablets. We purchased these tablets so that our students could work directly into our greenhouse. We were also able to put Wi-Fi in our greenhouse so the students could track data, plant growth, get real-time feedback on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. And this really just is kind of amplified their normal hands-on learning and put a technology piece in with it so that they're tying cross-curricular activities together, just preparing them again for where they're going to go after high school.
That's great. Do you find them to be more engaged when they have that technology in their hands?
Oh yeah, anytime a student gets technology in their hands,
Right.
they're more engaged.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think just their access to information is important for them because like I said, it's not Mr. Davin, I don't know what's going on. It's they can actually just look it up on their tablets right there and there.
Right.
Sometimes I may need to help translate some of the information, but a lot of times they're able to just answer their own questions and be able to move forward with whatever they're doing without getting that teacher feedback all the time.
Yeah, that's great. Paige, any other thoughts?
Sure. I described our WeatherBug station briefly, but in addition to that, we also have a lightning detection horn, which is really great for safety purposes because we're located in our town. Not only does it notify any athletic teams that are on the fields, but it also lets the community know when lightning is within a certain amount radius of our school.
Right.
So we really like that. And this WeatherBug is so meaningful for us because you can work with it all the way from pre-kindergarten through high school, so students can collect data over the years to actually monitor things like climate change, the effects of water patterns in the area. So it's monumental.
It's exciting that you will have the opportunity to grow that data.
We can't wait.
Over time. That's
Yes, it is.
super interesting. I would think that the WeatherBug also allows you, like we were talking about before, to integrate science, technology, engineering, math all together, also adding in, make it STEAM for agriculture or for arts, a lot of different ways
We
you can do that.
specifically addressed next generation science standards. That was very important to us, but also math, higher level skills, probability, statistics. So it all the way through our kindergarten through 12th grade curriculum, we will grow with our WeatherBug.
Got it. That's great. Why do you think it was important for a farmer to nominate you for the America's Farmers Grow Rural Education Program? So Beth, help us bring this back to an understanding of the role the farmer plays in this.
Well, I think it's extremely important. In order to even apply for that grant, you had to have a local farmer nominate your school district. And to have that farmer nominate you, to apply for the grant, and then to actually receive that grant and be able to show them what you've done with that is huge. Farmers have a huge impact on any community, and for them to be able to do that for us and then be able to see the benefits of that grant money, I think is great.
Paige, how about you guys? You had some farmers involved?
Absolutely. And farming and agriculture is the backbone of our community. That's what we do. That's what we know. And otherwise, if they had not nominated and we had not been successful, we would never have been able to afford this type of technology. So we can't express how thankful we are.
That's great. Great. Anybody else have engagement with our farmers through this program?
We actually had some farmers that nominated us. We luckily had quite a few farmers nominate our school every year. This was the first time I had applied for it, so I was very excited that I got it. And then the kids were so excited that we actually had a few farmers pay for us to go visit Monsanto, which again got the kids very excited about agriculture.
And hands-on learning.
Yes.
Great. Great. Okay. Any other thoughts?
We have sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jason. Go ahead.
We have lots of farmers that are really involved with our vocational agricultural program, but they were excited to be part of something beyond that too, in the science and math and technology areas. They were really proud of that. We had lots of responses from farmers that I was even surprised about. They were just thrilled to be part of that process.
I think our farmers want to get involved.
Yes.
They do.
Want to be,
They
they're
do.
part of such a
They
huge
do.
part of the community, and it's exciting for them to be involved
I
in the
agree.
schools.
Absolutely. One thing that I think is neat, we tried to, the year that we received the grant, we were able to actually, because you can see the farmers who have nominated you,
Right.
we were able to bring that farmer and his family into one of our Board of Education meetings and kind of recognize them, for doing this for us. And they didn't necessarily want the recognition or anything, but that we could do that and show that,
Right.
appreciation to them, I thought was great.
Right. That's great.
Beth, we did something similar to that. We had all the nominating farmers come to our school. We had a Monsanto day. We had our local seed rep there, and we all drove our tractors to school. And it was a great time. It was a great time.
So we're going to talk about the application at this point. What did you feel was the hardest part about the application process, or what challenges did you face when you were writing the application? John?
I think one of the hardest parts about writing the application is really trying to figure out how you're going to spend the money in the most efficient manner. I mean, $10,000 and $25,000 is a lot of money, but when you start purchasing a lot of this technology, sometimes you have to really look at where you're going to get the most bang for your buck when you're spending the money. So I feel that was probably one of the hardest things, is how can we impact the most amount of students? How can we make this grant program last more than just this year?
Right.
How can we expand it to where kids for the next 4, 5, 10 years are going to be able to be impacted by the same grant? So I feel that was probably one of the biggest things. The other thing that we really wanted to focus on was having a clear mission in what it is that we were trying to accomplish. So being able to identify exactly what we were going to use the money for, being able to identify how it's going to impact our curriculum, and the end result that we were hoping to receive after the grant was awarded to us and what we're going to get out of it. So I think that was one of the biggest and hardest things to do when we first started looking at the grant application.
I think you figure that out, it makes the
Right.
writing a lot easier.
Right.
I'm going to piggyback just real quick off something he said is when we were looking to write that grant, you can't have it be something separate and different from what you're already doing.
Right.
It does need to tie in so that it can be sustainable. And he hit it on the head when he said you have to tie it to that curriculum, and it has to be something that can be
Right.
maintained over the years.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
And I agree with what John said. When I applied, I had an idea in my head of what I wanted with genetics, but I realized that it would be so narrow and it would only affect one group of students at school. So when we came up with the LabQuest idea, that affects every student I teach every day, all the subjects that I teach. So if you can affect all of those students, and then like he said, it can be lasting from year to year to year, I think you have a much higher chance of actually getting the grant. Answering the questions, exactly what's on the application, make sure you're answering it thoroughly, but be specific. Know what your objectives are and what you're trying to go to. And again, be specific about what you're wanting to buy and how does that correlate to the next generation science standards or what I'm doing throughout the year, and have a good timeline as well.
I think that's great, really great. All great tips. Any others? I think what you said with the budget is really important. I will tell you, when the teachers and the farmers are reviewing the applications, they want to know where every dollar is spent.
Right.
And I don't mean, every $1,000, I mean every dollar.
Right.
So they really want to understand, not that that you're just buying computers and it's this much. They want to know what type of computers, how many of them are there, do you have cases or insurance or whatever it is that your district requires. So I think your point about being specific is really helpful.
Well, in the probes and the sensors that we had, I actually said what I was doing with them in chemistry and biology each quarter. So they knew exactly how I was going to use them and what I was going to use them for.
Which is great.
Yes.
Gives them such confidence that you'll be able to actually make this happen.
Right.
Yeah, great. Any other thoughts in the application process? Okay. What advice would you give to others that are looking to apply for a $10,000 or $25,000 grant through the program? Now it's time to give advice, Paige. What would you say?
Well, one thing we did was, when we had the idea of the weather bug, we approached our entire faculty and said, we think this is a good idea, but how about you? And if you do, how would you use this in your grade level? So each teacher gave us feedback on how they could utilize that. Then we turned that into a very focused application, and I think for us it was good that we were able to show high impact. Everybody across the school, and to take your time with that grant application, review it, make sure there aren't any errors. That's what I would say. Take your time, focus, know your plan.
Yeah, that proofreading is really important. Yeah.
And maybe have some other people read it over as well to give you some helpful hints too.
Exactly. Great advice. Yeah,
and one of the things I know I did, this was one of the first grants like this that I had written, and just doing your research. GrowRuralEducation.com had just tons of grant writing tips. It had different ideas for how to go about writing the grant, and that was huge. I think it was Paige that said, keeping your mission clear, exactly what you plan to do, what you want that end result to be, and then again outlining that budget, as you said, knowing where every dollar is going to go and how it's going to be spent. And sometimes that's not hard to do.
Exactly. And I do think the budget piece, we recognize over time that by the time you get the funds, things don't cost the same.
Right.
But I think when you're writing the application, you have to write it as if you had the funds today. How would you spend them? Because we can always rebudget, we can always change things, but if you don't have a plan going in, then the teachers and farmers who pick the winners probably don't have the confidence that that we can give, or they can give $10,000 or $25,000 to the district if they're not sure how at least the direction it's going to be spent.
And if you have to amend the budget, it's not that big of a deal. My computers were a lot cheaper than what I had originally budgeted.
Right.
And the science company I went through gave me a deal because I was ordering everything through them, so I was actually able to get more than what I had initially planned on.
And we love that.
Yes,
more for
exactly.
less. We always love that. Great. As a school that applied for the grant and did not win, and then applied again and won, what advice do you have for other schools who have not won a grant in the past? Jason, I know this happened with your school.
We were in the exact situation. We wrote the grant. We spent a fair amount of time on it and thought we had a good grant. And I think we did have a good grant, but it is a competitive grant. So what we did is we used the feedback process that the Monsanto Fund has in place. We were in on a conference call to explain to grant people who did not receive the grant what you could do to improve your application for following years. And we took that advice and we looked at it and we did that and we were successful.
That's great. Lots of tools and resources out there. You use them. John, other thoughts? I know this happened in your district as well.
Kind of the same thing. We've applied for the grant a couple times. We didn't get it a couple times. We got it the one time that we were able to receive it. Again, kind of like Jason said, just keep trying. It is competitive, so there's lots of really good ideas out there. I'm sure as much as the Monsanto Fund would love to fund everybody, it is a competitive process. So making sure, again, that you just have those kind of your ducks in a row, like we've talked over and over again so far about a clear goal, your budget, all that kind of things are just all important pieces. And making sure that, again, having multiple eyes on the application is going to be important too, because sometimes somebody may overlook something or may not find a detail as important as somebody else, and when these people are reviewing it, they're going to look at every detail. So you want to make sure that everything is the way it's supposed to be.
Yep, I think that's a great advice, I mean, especially if it's somebody who's not familiar with their with your program. And we all do this, right? If it's something we work in every day, we think everybody understands. But you know, there are teachers who are reviewing the grants, there are farmers who are reviewing the grants, and they might not have any idea what you're talking about at first. So I think that's a great, you know, advice to give it to somebody who is not familiar with your program, because if whatever questions they have, those are obviously areas that you can improve.
And I think that's something that Beth and I worked well on when we were writing the grant. Is I kind of was looking at it from the farmer and the agricultural side of it. She was looking at it more from the curriculum and the science base. So we got a good flow of what both of the parties are going to be looking for. So I think that helped our second grant when we applied for it become successful, because we looked at both sides and what do science teachers want to see in a grant application? What do the farmers want to see in a grant application? And we were able to hit both sides.
That's great. Good teamwork. Is there anything that you feel would have been helpful to know when you were going through the application process? So what do you wish that you knew? Melissa, you want to start?
Sure. With the application process, one of the first things I did was I went to the website, the Grow Rural America website, and they have some best practices, kind of like a PowerPoint on there, that went over lots of examples, lots of questions. They would actually show you a good, better, best answer. So that was very helpful. As far as filling out the grant application, and you know, telling you not to use acronyms, spell things out, because just like you said, a lot of times you abbreviate things and not everybody understands what it is. So yeah, I found that very helpful. As Jason said, the conference calls, you could do that as well.
I also found that conference call to be very helpful, especially having not completed a grant or applied for a grant like that previously. You could get on that conference call and not be afraid to ask any question that you had, and somebody was there to answer it, or somebody else was thinking the same question.
Great. Yep, that's great. Yeah, we provide that as an opportunity. Really, we provide some overview information on the grant itself, but it's an opportunity for people to ask questions and for us just to answer them. So it really is, you know, kind of having that extra resource. Some more information about that can be found at growruraleducation.com. So great. Anything else, Paige? Do you have anything you wish you knew?
Well, exactly how competitive it is and the layers that you have to go through. I think it's really important for people to know that they're writing to two different audiences. One is a panel or group of math and science teachers that will read, and then also the Farmer Advisory Council will read. So you have two different bodies to engage.
Right, great. And that goes back to what we were talking about before, right? And having somebody else read your application, knowing that it is going to people with multiple different experiences. They might not have any idea, you know, what ProWare is for a science classroom, or what a makerspace is, or you know, those aren't opportunities that we all had in our education growing up. Technology has changed things, so that's great.
I think something else that's important to know, you know, we had talked kind of privately earlier, but the number of farmers who nominate you, you might look and say, oh, only one farmer nominated me, or, you know, oh, 25 nominated me, I got this one in the bag, or whatever it may be. But for us, it was actually the year we were only nominated by one farmer that we actually had earned the grant. And then, you know, there were other years we had multiple farmers nominate us, and we didn't get it. So I think that's important to know as well when you get on there.
Yeah, those farmer nominations are important because it shows that you have the support of your community, right? But really, you're right. I mean, it takes one. It just takes one. It really is the quality of your program. And the teachers, as Paige said, you know, the teachers and the farmers, it's up to them to, you know, to read what you wrote and to determine whether or not the dollars would be put to good use in your school district. So, so great point. Why do some grants get rejected? So I think we've talked a little bit about this, and we've explained a little bit about the review process, but what do you guys think? I mean, from a, you know, obviously, like John said, we can't fund everything. At Monsanto Fund, we would love to be able to fund every request that we get, but we have $2.3 million. That sounds like a lot of money. it goes really fast. So any thoughts, or from your past experience or from conference calls that you've heard, any thoughts on reasons why some of the grants are rejected?
I would say because you don't have a clear focus and it's not going to affect a lot of students. The more students that can be captured using that grant, the better off I think you're going to be. Look for typos. Make sure you're answering the question as far as what the questions are. Just like I said, have somebody read it over, make sure that it makes sense, make sure it can be sustainable, used year after year.
Yes.
I think that would definitely help your grant.
Great, all good points. Did you want to say something?
Well, I'm just thinking again along the lines of that focus. I know we've talked a lot about that. Having clear goals and objectives for what you're planning to do. I remember the day that I got the email that said we did not get the grant, that we would not be moving in that process. And I sat back and, of course, thought, why did we get rejected? And when I sat back, it was because of just that. I was trying to tie in a math piece here, a science piece here, an ag piece here, but they didn't tie together. There wasn't one clear mission or one clear goal. I was clumping a bunch of things together and it didn't work out. So I sat back and I'm like, well, that's on me because I didn't have that that piece. And then the year that we did get the grant, we did have very clear goals and objectives and everything tied together in all those fields. So as we stated, that audience who's reading it, it does make a big difference.
Yeah.
I think you have to make sure that you explain carefully how the dollars are being used. I think if you have a dollar amount, you explain how that's going to impact students, and it's not broadly just saying technology in the hands of students. You have to explain how that is specifically going to be used, what's going to be done with it, and how it's going to be beneficial to students, how it's going to be measured.
Right. Yeah, I think the measuring the impact is really important. I will say one of the questions I get most often is about that measuring the impact, because this is a one-year grant, right? So you get this grant and you need to accomplish what you set forth in one school year. That can be really tough to measure, right? Because everybody wants to say their test scores are going to improve, right? Well, can you really purchase a greenhouse, build a greenhouse, implement the new curriculum, and improve test scores in 1 year? I mean, we would love it if everybody could, but it's really not realistic. So I think from a piece of advice as far as why some grants get rejected can be, you want to do everything, and that's great, and we hope that you can over 5 years. But in 1 year, you really have to figure out how can I measure that impact. And I think we talked about, so Jason, you are doing a robotics program. I mean, you can show impact simply by how engaged are the students. Before when we were in math class, the students were sitting with a textbook and doing worksheets and they were grumbling or sleeping or whatever it was they were doing. Well, oh my gosh, now we have this new math curriculum that has robotics as an element of it, and every student is participating. That's an easy way to measure impact, which people might not think about, right? Because it's not measuring in numbers. It is observation. So teacher observation can be a great way to measure the impact of a program, especially given the one school year. So
I just did simple pre-post tests on using the probes and the sensors and that, and it was a five question multiple choice. They obviously didn't have any idea what the probes were going to do or how they were going to work. So it was easy to show growth over time because the more they use them, the more they get used to them, the better they understand them. Right. And then their final test scores were very high with that.
Right. That's great. That's great. Any other thoughts on why things would get rejected? I think competition is one of them that we kind of allude to, but you have to write a good grant proposal.
The year we were rejected, and during the review process, that was really enlightening. The reviewer said your grant was very well written, but there were lots of highly competitive grants at that time. Sometimes that just happens.
Right. Exactly. So. I think that goes back to before we talked with you guys of, you rejected. We teach our kids all the time, you have to keep trying, right? So just keep trying. How are you sustaining the program that you received funding for? So I think somebody alluded to this earlier about, I think you talked about the ProWare. So talk about sustainability.
Well, the big cost was ordering the devices, the LabQuest devices, and that's what a majority of the $10,000 went to. All of the probes and sensors that then I can plug into it to measure different things are really pretty cheap. And so even though, I am limited in my budget at school, it is enough to buy more more probes and sensors every year. So, I have what I started with from the Monsanto Fund, but I'm adding to it every year. And so, there's more and more labs that we're doing. The kids enjoy it. They know how to use it. And I think that's another thing. If you can show that you can use it from year to year and add on to it really pretty cheaply, again, that would probably increase your chances of getting the grant as well.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that's true for us too. Our initial cost was the weather station, but that even came with lesson plans. So we have those from year to year. So if anything, ours grows from year to year with the amount of data that we have and are able to study. Yeah, we're thrilled about that. So the only fee the district has to cover is for the annual subscription to the Lightning device, but we feel like that is a safety measure that's important enough for us to maintain. So if anything, not only are we sustaining, we're growing.
Right, which is great. And it's great to talk about that in your application, right? So that or the reviewers know that you understand this isn't a one-year thing. We don't want this to be a one-year thing. We want this to be an ongoing improvement for your schools. Yeah. Did you have to provide specific training to help teachers and staff use the resources or technology that you purchased through the grant? This is a great question, and we talk about this all the time with all different grant applications that we get at Monsanto Fund. So any thoughts on this as far as your experiences with the programs that you had and the professional development or the preparation of the teachers?
Sure. It's not fair to anybody, whether it's Monsanto Fund or the teachers, to just be handed some new equipment and say, here you go. You have to make that time to train. The way it fell for us, we were able to install our equipment, and then on the first day institute, we had someone from WeatherBug actually train our faculty and staff on how to use it. So it made all the difference. Plus, they had the teachers had the summer to think about how they were going to utilize that the following year, so they had some really rich questions.
Sure, that's great. Anybody else? Professional development? I mean, I know at Monsanto when we train our teachers and the farmers, what they're looking for when they read and score grant applications, we talk with them a lot about the fact that technology is fantastic in the classroom, but it's just a tool. So it's not the silver bullet, right? It's what you do with it that really matters. And so one of the things that we do talk about all the time is make sure that the applicant either has the expertise in-house, which you as the applicant have to tell us that you do, or if they do not, that they have provided information on how they will make sure that their teachers or the faculty and staff will be trained so that those devices that they would like to purchase with the grant can be utilized. Otherwise, it takes years to figure out how to use that equipment and then get it into their classroom. So any other thoughts on professional development?
I think it's important to say that in your grant too. In my case, I started a robotics program, but I had a teacher already trained to do that.
Right.
I made sure that I stated that because otherwise I would have provided funds in the budget for training had that not been in place.
Right, exactly. I think you have to do one or the other. If you don't, it's highly unlikely that you will receive the grant, right? Because you have to instill that confidence that you can make this happen.
Right.
So, great. What was the hardest or the most unexpected part of starting the project that you planned with the grant application? Okay, so the kickoff. So we're laughing. Beth and John are laughing over there. We're starting with you.
Well, we, our grant was for the interactive tablets as well as Wi-Fi being installed in our greenhouse, which is across the street from our high school. So getting Wi-Fi there, we had to work very closely with our technology department, number one, even before we applied for the grant, to make sure that that could happen.
Sure.
But once we had the funds, we were able to then work with the technology department, get the tablets ordered, and get the Wi-Fi installed. But, to us, it felt like a long process because we're like, the money's here. All right, let's go. But
you're excited.
There's things that have to be put in place before those tablets just magically work. So that's kind of why we were chuckling a little.
Exactly. I think that's a really great point for our rural school districts. I mean, internet service is one of the trickiest things that a lot of our school districts deal with. So I think that's really important. And it's also important to say that you can include the costs of that in your grant application. So if it's trying to, improve your remote access, that can be a part of your grant application. If you're purchasing technology, you either need to make sure that you're including that cost, or if it is already provided, that you're telling reviewers that you have that. What is your biggest takeaway or success from your experience with America's Farmers Grow Rural Education? So that's a great question. People love success stories, right? Anybody have a success story, something that happened because of the grant that was a benefit to the students or to the district?
I think one of the things I kind of hit on earlier was watching the students be able to engage and learn themselves. As teachers, we're always trying to probe the students to ask questions, but with our tablets that we purchased in the greenhouse, the students were able to look up the information, were able to track the information that they were getting, compare it to real life data that is on the web or they can find in other resources, and again get that instant feedback. So it was one of those things where they could easily continue to grow in an educational standpoint without necessarily me as a teacher directing the education. They were able to really take it as in depth as they wanted it to go with it. So some of the higher level kids could really dive into something, and then also gave some of the lower functioning kids the resources they needed. If they didn't quite understand something, they had a resource that they could look it up without necessarily asking in front of the whole class.
Right.
So it was really kind of a neat thing to see the kids be able to engage in the lesson without really being engaged in me, but they were still learning.
Right, exactly. I think that problem-solving piece is incredibly important. So Jason and I were talking about this earlier about, how teaching our kids about STEM and opening their eyes to different career opportunities in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math. It is really fun to see them recognize differences. So one of the things that we hear, and that I know I've experienced, is, people think of scientists as, kind of rigid and head down and going to work. Well, you work with scientists; they're the most creative people in the world, because most of the time what they're doing fails, and they have to just keep coming up with new ideas and new ideas and new ideas. And so I think your point to the kids having that technology in their hands, it helps them say, okay, well, this didn't work, and what am I going to do about it? So, of course, the first thing they're going to do is Google it, right? And find out the answer. But I think that does help them say, oh, okay, well, here's 3 other options that I can start with, or talk to their to a classmate, or to their team or group that they're working with, and kind of bouncing those ideas off of each other. I think it is really a great opportunity for them to learn that they're going to fail, right? And they have to try again. Problem solving, and then those critical thinking skills that are so important for our kids growing up. So,
and in addition to that, in addition to critical thinking, problem solving, I think what was really important for our community was the sense of community that it brought, that everybody was working together, the pride in that we are a tiny school, but we are competitive with everybody else. So I think that is an aspect that should not be that shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, I think that's great. That's great. Anybody else?
We had an interesting situation where it developed more of a sense of connection between classroom and what's happening in real life. And we actually connected with another industry. So we talked about robotics in the robotics classroom, but then we actually went to the industry and saw robotics taking place in industry.
Right.
And then the people who were working with the robotics in that industry talked about how they fail at things, and then they correct the problem. And the kids that got frustrated over something not working in 5 minutes learned that these guys have been working for 3 years on it. and so it made that learning really authentic and helped them understand.
Absolutely. I love that example, because a lot of people that don't understand or not involved in education, they think robotics, what do you mean my kid's playing with Legos in school?
Right.
In reality there are so many different industries that basically, you can walk around a lot of different places, like you said, you take the kids on the field. Wait, they're basically playing with Legos at work. You mean that's the real deal? That engineering aspect, it's a great tool to learn so many different subjects, and then I love that applicability to the real world. So I do encourage you to visit growruraleducation.com for more information on the program. So again, thank you all very much, and thanks everybody online for your participation, and have a great day.